Afternoon, everyone. Commission come to order. All commissioners are present and accounted for. We'll begin with the approval of the minutes of October 5. They have been distributed. I see no further edits or amendments. If there's no objection, the minutes are adopted. Next on our item is number 3, public testimony. I know we have a few. Who's our first testifier? Okay, Lynn, is that you?
I'm here.
Why don't we start with you, Lynn? Good to see you again, and did read your written testimony. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm just going to sort of summarize that, but I was looking at the amendment that the League of Women Voters and Common Cause have on, I think it's the last item on the agenda, and I really like their language. I think it'll get rid of a lot of abuses that currently exist. So while you're looking at it, I would take a really strong look at what they came up with. I just wanted to point out why it's so important for the Sunshine Law to be followed by the legislature. I mean, I got 47 hours notice about this meeting, and I checked on Sunday because I thought it was coming up, and there was nothing on the website. And then at 3:07 Monday afternoon, in it pops. So it basically isn't enough time. But let's put that time frame into the regular legislative session, where you have lots and lots of bills and lots of committees meeting, even in one day, and all these people that want to testify, and they have to sort through everything in sometimes less than 48 hours, and their testimony is due in 24 hours in advance. It's just not fair for the people. And then while you're talking about how to clean up some of the stuff and where you've seen abuses, my concern is you're not thinking that. I wish you could find some criminals that have done this sort of stuff, like government does sometimes, so they teach courses in how you can avoid things, because they could probably tell you what other items you should be looking at. Because you're all law-abiding, we all know the rules, and our minds don't work that way, so we really can't come up with something unless somebody's seen it in the past. So that's basically all I have to say. Thank you.
2 points. I appreciated your written testimony saying we commissioners don't know how to think like criminals, so thank you. And the other point is, Lynn, I think we all agree, we were trying to get it posted Friday.
Yeah.
But we weren't able to, so my apologies for kicking it over to this week, and your point is well taken. We're trying to avoid that in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other witnesses? Okay, we've also received written testimony from the election office and from Gary Hoosier, and those have been distributed to the members. We're going to then move on to item number 4, consideration of draft bills related to campaign finance reform. I may jump in from time to time, but I'm going to turn it over to Kristen to take care of this part of the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Chair. You know, on behalf of the Campaign Spending Commission, of course, we want to thank the campaign. We want to thank the Special Commission for this opportunity.
Kristen, could you introduce who's there with you?
Oh, sure, absolutely. So my name's Kristen Izumi Mitao. I'm the Executive Director, and also present today is our Associate Director, Tony Baldemero, as well as our General Counsel, Gary Cam. So amongst the three of us, we will be presenting these 10 bills on the agenda, and which I would like to inform the commission that these 10 bills were unanimously approved by the Campaign Spending Commission at our monthly Sunshine meeting on September 22nd, 2022. So some of these bills that we're gonna speak about today were stylistically changed, but substantively the content is the same. So we are thus hoping that this special commission will also support these 10 bills. I'd also like to comment that we do have a public funding bill in the works, but we need to present it to our commission, and therefore, I would, of course, request that this special commission permit us to present it at perhaps your November 9th meeting for consideration. So it will not be discussed today. That being said, let me move forward, and I realize there's a number of bills, so between Gary, myself, and Tony, we will be presenting as well as fielding questions. So we will try to start each bill with naming the title of the bill and talking a little bit about it. So I'm gonna let Gary, Cam do the first two, and then I'll take over some and let Gary take over some of the others.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, members of the commission. The first one I'm going to cover is Bill for an Act relating to violations of campaign finance law. This bill increases the amount of fine from $1,000 to $5,000 that may be assessed against a non-candidate committee making only independent expenditures that has received at least one contribution of more than $10,000 or spent more than $10,000 in an election period for campaign spending law violations. The bill will also allow the Campaign Spending Commission to order the fine be up to 3 times the amount of the unlawful contribution or expenditure, and to order that the payment of the fine assessed against a non-candidate committee or any portion thereof be paid from the personal funds of an officer of the non-candidate committee. The second bill is a bill for an act.
Could we do it one bill at a time, Kristen?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. This is, I just will comment that this bill, we have actually tried to have passed by the legislature about how many times, Gary?
I don't know, since around 2013, quite a while.
This was before this special commission in the last session, and I believe there was approval, or at least a recommendation to approve it, but it didn't get approved. So this bill and the next bill are remnants from the last legislative session.
Okay, do
But
any
yeah.
commissioners have any questions for Christian or Gary? I think the bill is somewhat self-explanatory. Any questions? Robert?
Kristen, as best you can summarize, have there been any expressed comments why the bill wasn't passed previously or objections?
Gary, you want to answer that?
No, there haven't been. In the pre-legislative meetings that we've had with the committee chairs and leadership, everyone has expressed support for the concept of increasing the fines against a super PAC. So I don't know why it hasn't passed.
I guess one second question. I noticed that it actually would require potentially the fines to be assessed against the officers of the non-candidate committee.
Right.
Is there, if it's like an organization, is there any way to go after the organization underlying it? Or would that be the presumption that the organization itself would have to figure out how to assess that?
Well, the commission only has jurisdiction over the registered entity, which is a non-candidate committee.
Okay.
As well as the chairperson and treasurer. So that's why it's that reference.
Understood. Thank you.
Any further questions, Nicholas?
No.
Janet?
No.
Barbara?
Thank you.
Flo, any questions? If not, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of adopting this bill, please raise your hand. All opposed? Bill is adopted. Okay, Gary, we can go to the next bill.
Okay, thank you. The next one is a bill for an act relating to campaign spending commission orders. This measure amends HRS 11-410 by, number 1, amending subsection B to provide that a person waives the right to a contested case hearing if the person fails to request a contested case hearing within 20 days of receipt of the commission's preliminary determination. And number 2, amending subsection D to provide that a final order of the commission may be filed in the First Circuit Court for confirmation as a civil judgment, enforceable and collectible as any other judgment issued in the circuit courts.
So for purposes of history, this also was a bill that was presented in the last session. Gary, this is a bill too that we worked with the Attorney General's Civil Recoveries Division.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is a bill that's recommended by the Civil Recoveries Division in the Attorney General's office. They help us by enforcing or collecting on our orders in circuit court. And I guess especially important for them is that the orders being treated as a judgment, as any other judgment in circuit court.
Hey, any questions for Gary? Robert?
Sorry. With regards to the subsection B, I'm not sure if Chapter 92 spells out, is there a need to specify how somebody would request a contested case hearing? Whether in writing or?
Well, you know, this is not, it's the 20 days to request a contested case hearing is also in the section of the law which talks about making a preliminary determination of probable cause. So it's nothing new. We've had preliminary determinations where a contested case hearing was requested. So I think what the language in the bill is sufficient so that people will know that they have 20 days to ask for a contested case hearing.
If you're comfortable with it, obviously I support it. I did take a look at 11405B and it doesn't specify either the form, and so I'd maybe be worried, putting my cynical lawyer hat on, what if somebody mails something on the 19th day and you don't receive it, for example, kind of situations. But again, support the bill and the concept. Just if that's a necessary change we need to make later, if you think so, then great. If not, again, I think it's up to you.
If there is an issue with that, you could always clarify with adoption of an administrative rule. Would that be correct?
We could.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Are there any questions for Gary or Christian? Nicholas?
No.
Janet, Barbara, Flo?
No, thank you.
Okay, if no further discussion, all in favor, please raise your hand. Adopting it? All opposed? The bill is adopted. Thank you very much, Gary. Christian?
Okay, so this next one is titled Relating to Candidate Committee and Non-Candidate Committee Organizational Reports. This proposal requires the Campaign Spending Commission to publish on our website the names of candidates as well as persons who qualify as non-candidate committees or PACs who fail to register with the commission. So 11-321 provides that candidates are required to file their organizational report with the commission within 10 days of filing nomination papers for office or the date which they receive contributions or make or incur expenditures of more than $100 in the aggregate during the election period. Further, non-candidate committees or PAC are also required to file their organizational reports with the commission within 10 days of receiving or making or incurring expenditures of more than $1,000 in a 2-year election period. So we have found that in every election, there are candidates and persons who qualify as non-candidate committees who fail to register. And thus the public is unable to see who is in charge of these committees as well as their disclosure reports. So I want to give a very bright line example. In this 2022 election, we have 2 candidates, Henry Cho, who is running for Hawaii County Council District 6, and Candace Linton, who ran for House District 4, are 2 examples of candidates who filed nomination papers in the 2022 election and never filed an organizational report, nor did they file any of the required disclosure reports. So for all intents and purposes, we feel that this is important for the voters and the public to know that these candidates never complied at the front end, at the very beginning of their of the campaign spending process. As for non-candidate committees, there are anywhere from 20 to 40 new organizations that are required to register who contribute more than $1,000 typically to candidates and fail to register. So we're always chasing them. So again, it's a similar area where we feel it's important for the public and the voters to know what organizations, what businesses are contributing more than $1,000 to candidates and they fail to register. So it captures it at the front end. That's what this bill does.
Any question for Christian? None? We'll call for a vote. All in favor of adopting the bill, please raise their hand. The bill is adopted. Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you. Okay, so the next one is titled Relating to Candidate Committee and Non-Candidate Committee Fundraisers. This bill would require candidate committees and non-candidate committees to file fundraiser notices regardless of the price or suggested contribution for attending the function, which right now is more than $25. And this is to increase transparency. And further, it is a recognition that a fundraiser can really fly under the radar and not file a notice of fundraiser, but yet collect contributions up to the candidate's contribution limits. So I think we're trying to capture that with this law and just make it a uniform. You must file a fundraiser notice with our office if you're gonna have one, and not have it dictated by the amount on the ticket or being asked.
Okay, any questions for Kristen? Robert?
Kristen, I don't know, did you happen to see Gary Hooser's testimony, and do you have a response? I can summarize if you need it.
Yeah, please.
His testimony was sort of concerned that essentially anything in that case could potentially become a fundraiser, like where somebody stands up and says, hey, I'd suggest you donate money, you know, whatever. And so I think his concerns, it's a bit broad in that essentially everything potentially could become a fundraiser. Again, this is a late testimony we just received, so relatively recent.
Sure. Well, I mean, I'll let also Gary and Tony comment. Right now, under 11-342, we do have a definition of a fundraiser. So I don't know if that would qualify, because a fundraiser talks about a name and address of a person in charge, the price per person, the date, hour, and place of the fundraiser and method. So, but I guess if your concern has to do with an event, Gary or Tony, do you have a comment?
Comment on that. Right now, the fundraiser notice is required if there's a price or suggested contribution to attend the function. So if that doesn't exist, and of course it has to be more than $25. If that doesn't exist, then the fundraiser notice is not required. So I think we're keeping that requirement, that there be a ticket price or a suggested contribution. But you're saying this, Gary's testimony, the person is making a pitch at the fundraiser, right?
Or at a rally or event, etc.
Okay, let me just follow up on that question if I can, Tony. If somebody has a rally and the candidate stands up at the podium and says, we'd really appreciate any contribution you could make, would that be covered by this bill?
In my opinion, it would. I think a fundraiser that requires notice would have to have some kind of pre-planning such that there's a time, there's a place. There, well, right now there needs to be an amount that's more than $25. But, you know, there might be an ask for an amount and not something as impromptu as a candidate standing up at a rally when nothing was planned beforehand. That would kind of make it impossible to require the candidate to file a notice prior to him making the request.
So you wouldn't regard that campaign rally as a fundraiser if no notice was filed?
That, in my opinion, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a similar question to Judge Foley. You know, I was reading Governor Ariyoshi's oral history the other month, and he talked about the coffee hours that he used to have on the campaign trail. I'm not sure whether or not he asked for, you know, contributions at these coffee hours, but could a candidate conceivably have a coffee hour at, you know, a cafe or even at a Starbucks to hear the concerns of the community and constituents, and also have, you know, campaign materials there, you know, even if not asking for money, clearly it's not a fundraiser. So I think, I would think that candidates, including office holders, would have the latitude to engage the public in that fashion.
If it's not a fundraiser, then the fundraising notice requirement would not apply.
Yeah. I just wanted clarification of that there are ways for candidates, including office holders, to interact with the public in a non-formal setting.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're not monitoring coffee hours, I get it.
Great.
We don't get invited, actually.
Okay.
Do
Any
they
other
even have them anymore?
Any other questions for Kristen or Gary? If not, I'll call for the vote. All in support of passing the bill, please raise their hand. Bill is adopted.
Okay, thank you. All right. The next one is titled Relating to Campaign Contributions. With respect to this one, this is actually a carryover of the conversation that was started in the last legislative session, where the commentary is that the fundraising ban didn't go far enough. So this specific bill proposes or prohibits elected officials from soliciting and accepting campaign contributions during any regular session or special session of the state legislature, including any extension of any regular session or special session and any legislative recess days, holidays, and weekends. It's being submitted to further deter corruption, which was, again, the main focus of the last legislative session in which this bill was introduced.
Okay, and if I recall, Christian, correct me if I'm wrong, our recommendation last session was not adopted, not on the merits, but the bill that prohibited fundraising during a session had a title that didn't include this. That's what the committee chair said. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think, you're right, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions for Christian or Gary? Robert?
I apologize to keep asking so many questions. In your mind, my understanding is that there was a bill passed last year which did prohibit fundraisers during session, and that applies to all candidates, correct?
I think it's only elected officials,
Only elected
not all
officials.
candidates.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So this is an extension of that.
I guess maybe just for the sake of drawing it out, I think one of the concerns that Senator Rhodes had expressed with a ban applying to everyone, essentially all candidates, was the concern that a lot of new candidates starting to run for office typically are going to decide to run or file to run during the session, and it would really become a restraint on new candidates from being able to fundraise, essentially, which is essentially during session and then a month or two before the first primary occurs. Again, my timing might be a little bit off there, but I think that was the primary objection. This bill addresses that concern by only focusing on electeds, and so therefore, and there's, realistically, there's a good argument for why somebody running for office isn't subject to the same corruption concerns. They're not actively voting on these bills, et cetera. So, I support the intent and support what it's doing and will support it. I just wanted to draw out the distinction, either you're going to put it specifically on electeds, or if it's going to apply more broadly, then we sort of have to address the concerns that it may give the incumbents too big of a advantage over someone who's just starting to run and is unable to fundraise. Hopefully
Yes,
that.
thank you, Robert, for the distinction, yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Questions? If not, I'll call for a vote. All in support of passing this bill, please raise your hand. Bill is adopted. Thank you, Kristen.
Okay. Moving on, the next one is titled Relating to Campaign Spending Cash Contributions. So what this proposal does is it limits the amount of cash a candidate committee or non-candidate committee can receive to $100. We have found that it is very difficult to follow the money with cash transactions. And of course, that obviously will lead to fraud and abuse. So we believe that $100 is a sufficient amount to permit the public still be active and participate in the electoral process. Further, it mirrors the amount permitted for calabash bowls as currently provided in HRS 11-353D. Furthermore, it requires receipts for each contribution. So again, there's more of a paper trail. So that's where we're going with this one.
Nicholas?
I like this bill, and I'm going to obviously vote for it, but I would like Kristen or the council's comments on moving toward a cashless system of contributions in the future, and the possibility of doing that.
Nikos, what do you mean by cashless?
Meaning that campaigns and candidate committees not be able to accept cash donations, but it has to be electronic. You know, we have like parking garages and coffee shops that don't accept cash. You know, they could accept checks, they could accept electronic forms of payment, something where there's an actual record. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
Barbara?
Kristen, even if you gave $50, you're required to list the name and address of the donor, correct? $50 cash. Even if it's $100, there is a paper trail. There should be a paper trail.
You know, I'm gonna let Tony answer that, because Tony can also maybe talk about the reporting with respect to what the public would see in those types of transactions.
Tony?
Yeah, can you repeat that?
Well, let's say I go to a fundraiser and I put in $50 cash in a calabash. You're required to take my name and address, right?
That is correct.
So this limits it to $100, and you're supposed to be writing down the contact information, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. We do have one exception in our law regarding anonymous contributions, and that has to do with calabash bowls. But at least a minimum of 10 people have to put money in the bowl, and the total amount in the bowl has to be less than $100. But in your case, you just said one person giving cash, so yes, the name and address will have to be obtained by that candidate committee.
You know, I don't think it's, if you have, as long as you're required to take name and address, I don't have any problem with the cash donation. And I'm going to vote no on this particular measure, because I just want to point out that when you have limits and people want to donate more, they're apt to exceed that limit by giving to other ways that are where you're not required to take any contact information. For instance, super PACs. And so you could give, you're limited to no cash in this particular case, to giving $1 million to a super PAC, and there's nothing wrong with that. So it's just a point I want to make to demonstrate that there's some type of committees where there is secret money. So if you don't take it personally.
Okay. Any other questions for Christian, Tony, Gary? Any other comments? If not, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of passing this bill, please raise their hand. All those opposed? The measure is passed.
Okay, so the next bill is a bill for an act relating to campaign contributions. This bill applies a ban on contributions from state and county contractors to grantees of the state under Chapter 42 and of the counties under the various charters or county codes. And also apply to the owners, officers, employees, and their immediate family of the government contractor or state or county grantee. Currently, the only entity that is a government contractor, or I'm sorry, only the entity that is the government contractor is prohibited from making political contributions. A contractor can easily get around the ban by having its officers and employees and their family members make contributions, including, as has happened in the past, false name contributions. This bill would go a long way to prevent that problem. Also, state and county grantees are in the same position as government contractors. Both receive state funds or county funds that have been appropriated by the legislature or the county legislative body. Thus, the ban should apply to state grantees and county grantees also.
Robert?
Sorry, before I ask questions, I'll just point out, I did not ask any questions on the last bill, so I reserved a little bit extra time. Thank you. I noticed in certain parts of the bill, it has the language, at any time between the execution of the contract, ... to the completion of the contract. However, in subsection C and D, the to the completion of the contract language is missing. Was that intentional, or was that am I misreading this, or is this a Scribner error?
That is an error.
Would you accept a friendly amendment to include the until completion?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
For both subsection C and D? Do we need to do anything more formal?
Any objection to the proposed amendment? Hearing none, amendment adopted. So we're now considering the bill as amended.
Could I ask a clarifying question? So this is actually quite a bold proposal. Oh.
Was it specifically on that?
Oh, is it on that? Sorry.
I have more, if you don't mind.
No.
So I agree with you, it is a, okay.
No. Go.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Finish. Yeah, absolutely.
I agree it is a bold proposal, and I really think it could be very important. I guess the follow-up question I had was, owners, officers, and employees. I worry about the constitutionality for employees. You can make, I think, some rational argument about, principal officers, et cetera, but for example, Hawaiian Electric Company, I think, would be caught in this, and all of its employees potentially would then be also swept into it. And so I am wondering if maybe the focus should be on essentially like principal officers, and employees should be excluded.
Gary, Christian, do you have any response to that?
And that might be a better approach. However, we're talking about the smaller employer where, you got the owner and there's really no distinction between everybody else who are actually employees, but you might call them something else, like vice president, treasurer, whatever. And there's maybe 10 to 15 people, including the family members, as opposed to something as big as Hawaiian Electric. So
I would argue, I guess, for a small, 10 or 15 member company, presumably you're still going to have to identify, for purposes of reporting, officers, et cetera, and you'd sort of essentially be dictating, essentially people in charge would not be able to contribute. But again, I would really be concerned about the constitutionality of saying, like, for example, all the employees of a very large company also being similarly prohibited.
I can see the concern, but that's not the kind of cases that we actually investigate, right? There's a smaller companies that they have more limited amount of employees, less than 15, less than 20, less than 15, and a lot of the same last names. So we haven't looked specifically at like a corporation as large as Hawaiian Electric as the contractor, but it exists. So
currently, my understanding is a lot of those large corporations do not donate. They will have their officers show up and donate instead. And so this would somewhat capture some of that if we were to define it as officers. However, I would read this as expanding it much larger as well, though, to the individual employees.
Yeah, well, that has to be addressed. I mean, you know, the large corporations, if they want to participate, what they do is they form PACs and they participate through PACs.
And I guess I want to further what Gary's saying. I mean, this speaks to these fact patterns. I mean, we hear a lot of public sentiment about pay to play, and so this sort of addresses it. And the scenarios that Gary mentions actually have to do with a lot of the recent indictments that came down that would have prohibited those other contributions made by employees as well as some family members.
I again very much support that, and I'm trying to interpret the language here to try to maximize the intent. So immediate family members, officers, owners, seems like it would be a good step in the right direction. The unintended consequence of saying employee would be essentially any entity that has a contract with the state, which could include presumably Hawaiian Tel, Hawaiian Electric, any of the energy providers, et cetera, and all their employees also now being banned from doing campaign contributions under this language. And I happily be corrected if I'm wrong. I just, would posit that would probably be a problem. So is there a good solution, or, striking employee as an interim measure? Again, just.
I think the easiest way to go about it in this setting would be to just strike employee, because I see that problem if you're dealing with a large government contractor.
I had a similar question on that front, because this conceivably extends to any organization, including nonprofit organizations that receive state grant and aid. It also conceivably includes any service provider that has a contract to provide homelessness services in a certain region. And I don't really have a problem with that. I've given a little bit of money to candidates, but if we want to extend it that far, I think that the commission is to be commended for being that kind of zealous, if that's the proper word, in kind of its ambition to ensure that people who conduct business with government, whether they be from the private sector or even the nonprofit sector, should have an arm's, if not an arm's length, then not have skin in the game in that fashion, so to speak. So mahalo to you for doing that.
Any other questions or comments? from
Constitutional considerations aside.
Yeah, I do want to say the contracts only include certain specified types of contracts, but it does encompass all grants and aid. And I think we were concerned, put employees in, because it's also, we're going to get into a situation if you're going to, we just want to include the whole organization that has the contract. Because it's only from the execution to the completion. It's a captured period of time, so that you're not buying or making any influence. Because every organization has a different definition of officer too. So if we're going to really get into the weeds, this is going to make it more. We're going to get into more litigation as to what are you? Can you give? Can you not give? And again, it's just a finite period of time. Again, that we were trying to capture to impact pay to play, which I think everybody in this commission has heard, concerns over pay to play. So this is you're right, it's very comprehensive. We're trying it. Of course, we want your support, but understand the parameters. But employees was really a broader sense, because it's going to be hard for us to decipher some things as far as what you are.
Okay,
in the company or
so
organization.
Christian, as I understand it, despite the concerns raised, you would prefer to keep employees in the bill.
Well, I'll defer to Gary.
Gary?
take it out.
Okay, would you like to make a proposed amendment, Robert?
I would propose striking employee, and I'd like to call it out specifically, but I may miss some of the references. In subsection C and subsection D. Wordsmithing, any wordsmithing required obviously to make that work, but strike the word employees.
Okay, any further discussion on that?
I think there's also a reference in sub E.
Yes, thank you.
Any further discussion? If not, I'll call for a vote on the proposed amendment. All in favor,
I'll abstain.
please raise their hand.
I'll abstain.
4 in favor. Those opposed, please raise their hand. So the proposed amendment is adopted. So we currently have the bill before us as amended twice by our distinguished vice chair.
Sorry.
With the support of the commission. Kristen?
And just for the record, I think I have to abstain too, because I don't have, it's the bill in that form, so,
Okay.
I'll just for the record abstain from the vote, but understand.
Janet?
I would just like to thank the commission for composing the bill. I think it's very important and will have a dramatic impact. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll call for a vote on the bill as amended.
Okay.
All in favor of the bill as amended, please raise their hand.
Abstain.
Opposed, please raise their hand. And 2 abstentions. The bill is
Thank
adopted.
you.
Can I just similarly echo Janet's comments? I think this bill is going to be quite sweeping. In conversations with people from other states, a lot of the ethical and corruption issues they've had, our existing contractor law has helped us avoid, I think, many of the situations. I think this is only going to go a little bit further. So again, I think it's a great concept.
Okay, next.
Yeah,
bill.
I would agree. I think it is more cutting edge, having consulted our sister type organizations, and it will definitely mark a chapter if it gets a pass. So yes.
Okay, moving forward, next bill, Christian?
Okay, the next bill is a bill for an act relating to preliminary determination of probable cause. This bill provides for the service of the Commission's preliminary determination of probable cause via first-class mail. Currently, the Commission is required to serve the preliminary determination of probable cause via certified mail. The Commission has had instances where the candidate refused to claim the letter, and the letter was returned to the Commission, thereby preventing the service of the document as required by law. At the same time, the preliminary determination of probable cause and other prior documents have been sent to the candidate's address via, or non-candidate committee's address via first-class mail as provided in the committee's organization report, and were not returned to the Commission as undeliverable. So there seems to be just an intentional not claiming the certified mail.
Any questions for Gary? Any comments? If not, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of passing the bill, please raise their hand. Bill is adopted. Thank you, Gary.
And next one is a bill for an act relating to complaints alleging violations of campaign spending law. This one amends HRS 11-403 to provide for a presumption that a violation has occurred for respondents who fail to explain or otherwise respond to the complaint alleging campaign spending violation. Commission staff consists of 5 members and 5 commissioners who are volunteers in the community who meet once a month in a sunshine meeting. There are over 600 candidates and non-candidate committees that the Commission regulates. This proposal will allow the Commission to more timely and efficiently address campaign finance violations, which is especially critical in an election year.
Okay. Any questions? Robert?
Just procedurally, how would you handle this? Would this sort of be treated as a default, or would you still hold a hearing and allow it to be a rebuttable presumption?
Yes,
So you would hold a hearing and allow it to be a rebuttable presumption?
yeah.
Okay.
Because the decision has to be made by the Commission at a meeting.
Any further questions for Gary? If not, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of passing the bill, please raise their hand. The bill is adopted. Christian, I'm gonna jump in for a moment. We're moving to item J, right?
Yes.
Okay, and I've discussed this with Janet and Kristen and Nikos. There's two bills. One is the first one on the agenda, eliminating the use of campaign funds to purchase up to 2 tickets. And then the so-called proposed amendment is actually a separate bill that has been distributed that would do that and more. So if the second bill is adopted, the first bill becomes moot because it's included. So if there are no objections, I would like to take up first a bill put forth by Nicholas and Janet that is in the agenda, referred to as the proposed amendment. If there's no objections, can we take that one up first? Hearing no-
Sure.
Robert?
I guess I would also sort of, as another proposal would be, is could we potentially consider both of them and in some situation actually even recommend both? I see the Campaign Spending Commission's bill as potentially being more politically feasible, and so potentially having both options there may be beneficial. Whereas if we consolidate to the, let's call it this more stringent or stricter version, we may be losing the opportunity to follow what the Campaign Spending Commission is trying to propose here.
Okay.
As an option, instead of just saying it's an amendment, potentially it's just saying we'd
I'll take that as an objection, so we'll stick with the agenda, given there's an objection. So let's take up your bill first, Christian, the one with 2 tickets.
Okay, all right, so the title of the bill is called Relating to Candidate Committee Expenditures. So under HRS 11-381, candidate committees have 8 authorized uses of campaign funds. This particular bill would eliminate one of those, and that is the use of campaign funds to purchase up to 2 tickets for an event or fundraiser held by another candidate or committee. So we have found that this practice leads to candidates building factions and building and buying influence. Further, it is inconsistent with 11-382, which talks about prohibited use of campaign funds to support the campaigns of other candidates or campaign against another candidate not directly opposing the candidate with which they are directly associated. The only exception to what I just said is for political parties who may support more than one candidate, as well as a candidate for the office of governor or lieutenant governor may support a co-candidate. So in this case right now, it'd be, the lieutenant governor and the governor on the Democratic side and on the Republican side. I realize that there is a proposed amendment. This is the version for which our commission approved. So of course, we're going to recommend approval of this one.
Any questions or discussion? And since we're gonna, I think, take up the other bill as a separate bill, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of passing this bill, please raise their hand. Bill is adopted. So now we'll move on. What is referred to as a proposed amendment to that is actually a separate bill. And Janet, Nikos, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. This bill that Nikos and I have worked on is called Relating to Campaign Funds. It is much broader than the previous bill, which was discussing purchasing tickets for event fundraisers. And that's because we consider using campaign funds for anything except campaign expenses inherently problematic. Over the years, the permitted uses of campaign funds have greatly expanded to include donations to communities, service organizations, educational organizations, youth organizations, recreational, charitable, scientific, literary organizations, public schools, or libraries. Now, the underlying basis for our objection is that the donor gave the money anticipating that it would be used for campaign expenses. And the candidate is essentially substituting his or her judgment for the donor's donation, if you will. We think that even though such expenditures are not a big portion of the authorized uses for campaign donations, we had a calculation, thank you, Campaign Spending Commission, we had a calculation that in the 2022 election year so far, $277,200.68 has been donated to or given to such organizations. Now, we don't think the candidates intend to buy votes in this way, but unfortunately, the impact is the same. And we think a bright line now needs to be drawn between using the donations expressly for campaign expenses like advertising, purchase of promotional material, and so forth. Nikos, I'm sure you have something you'd like to add.
Yes, I would like to quote from a wonderfully written testimony earlier this year on this very issue, which states in part, contributors make contributions to candidates for the purpose of seeking nomination or election to office. If a contributor wanted to donate to a tax-exempt organization or a public school or library, that contributor would give the money directly to the organization and receive whatever tax benefit that the contributor would be entitled by making the donation. So I think what we see here is the opportunity for candidates and office holders to potentially curry favor with specific people that might fall out of the purview of, regulatory eyes and even journalistic eyes. So I believe that there's merit in having a more stringent approach to what campaign funds be used for. I will admit that there might be, some special consideration given to somebody who's retiring from office. But if somebody intends to keep going in the legislative process, I think that it would be prudent to be a little bit bolder, as we were with the bill related to 42F and contractors, to make a clear, bright line rule, a relatively clear and bright line, that campaign contributions be used for campaigns. That's it.
Any questions,
I
Janet?
would like to add that this commission is certainly concerned with abuse of power and actual corruption. We should also be concerned about the perception of corruption, and that's what this bill speaks to in part.
Any questions for Janet
Well,
or Nikos?
Right now, we even have a situation where, constituents can get mailers from incumbents, and I've seen it firsthand, where a coupon is offered for a particular business. I have no problem with what was offered. Somebody can go and buy, the product recommended, but then the question arises, why is this legislator, aligning themselves with a particular brand and forwarding that to their constituency? So, in a similar fashion, I believe that office holders should not have the discretion to sort of take campaign funds and sort of to quote unquote seed the community. I think there are other mechanisms where that can be accomplished.
Barbara?
Thank you, Judge Foley. In the past, I've had some surplus funds after an election, and I've always wanted to help the PTA, the Friends of the various schools in my district, and also Friends of Kamiki Library or Einheiner Library, which are both in my district. And so I could understand the arguments on this, but it's not as direct as funding somebody else's, buying 2 tickets to another candidate's fundraiser. So regrettably, I am in opposition to this particular bill, but did support the former one. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Any other questions or comments? Kristen or Flo? If there are no further comments or questions, I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor, please raise their hand. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Those opposed, raise your hand.
I think it's 5.
I believe it was 5.
Oh, 5? Oh, I didn't see your hand, Robert. 5. Those opposed? 1. And Christian, you're abstaining? Okay, so 5 for, 1 against, 1 abstention. Bill passed. Thank you. Thank you very much, Christian, Gary, and Tony, for your
Thank you.
your segment. Moving on to item 5, consideration of draft bills deferred from prior meetings. I think these are generally Janet and Nikos's, and they may not all be ready, but let's go. Recordings of public meetings, do we have anything on that?
We're working on final language for that, Judge.
And then the next item, I think you,
Oh, no, yeah.
public records? Do we have any?
Janet?
When we discussed this bill at our last meeting, there were suggestions to add clarifying language in the form of, and that's been added in the form of a preamble. The first 2 paragraphs toward the beginning of the bill are added. And also, let's see, there was one other change. There was language added to make it clear. Is that it, Nikos? Was that it? That's it. Okay, thanks. Yeah. Basically, we did what was suggested at the last meeting.
Okay. Robert, I know you raised some issues on this. Are you satisfied with the changes?
I'm comfortable with this.
Okay. Are there any questions for Janet or Nicholas? If not, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of passing the bill, please raise their hand. Bill is adopted. Now, next we're moving on to elections bill. We did receive written testimony from the elections office, and we deferred this. Are we ready to take that up now or at a later meeting?
I think we can take it up now.
Go ahead.
At the last meeting, we discussed this bill, and I believe it was Christian made a suggestion that we receive some feedback from the Office of Elections on the bill. They did submit testimony on the bill, quite supportive testimony, and suggested how they would propose to implement the bill. So I think we're ready to take a vote.
Okay. Anything to add, Nicholas? Any questions or comments?
Were there suggested recommendations from the Office of Elections to make changes?
There
I mean,
were
I think they asked for, did they ask for funding?
They outlined how much it would cost them to implement the bill. So it is appropriate that there be an appropriation in the bill. But it's possible that other agencies would incur costs as well. So I think we need to leave that unspecified. An appropriation will be necessary, yes.
Any other further questions or comments? If not,
I think
call
Kirsten
for a
has-
vote. All in
no,
favor?
no,
Kirsten has
I
a
was just-
comment.
Yeah, I was just gonna
Sorry,
comment,
Judge.
yeah, the Office of Elections testimony states that their estimated costs did not include translations and printing costs of ballot questions. So, Janet, you're right, there's just a little bit more as far as the numbers, which I guess as long as they're not, it's a work in progress. And I guess I would also just make a comment about the bill requiring the Attorney Generals and Corporation Counsel as well as to weigh in. So hopefully you'll have their support as well, and no obstacles to that. But in theory, I'm fine with it.
Okay, thank you. We have started to circulate the bill to other agencies besides the Office of Elections. We haven't received comments yet, though.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for Janet or Nicholas? If not, I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor of passing the bill, please raise their hand. The bill is adopted. So congratulations. That's all the bills. That's a tremendous accomplishment. Thank you so much, Christian, Gary, Tony, Janet, and Nikos for putting this together. Moving on to other matters, I just have one to remind everybody. I unfortunately enter a 4-week currently scheduled arbitration come Monday. So the coming meetings, Robert, our vice chair, he will be chairing. Although I won't be here to vote if the arbitration goes as scheduled, I will be reviewing everything and giving you input over the weekend. So thank you, Robert. Are there any, we're going to get to next meetings, but before that, any other matters anyone wants to raise or discuss? If not, our next meetings we blocked out are currently, and correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, October 26th, November 2nd, and November 9. On October 26th, we currently have scheduled, Robert, ethics and legislative process.
Correct.
And did you have something you wanted to raise as far as chairing that meeting?
My intent is to circulate a draft agenda as soon as tomorrow. We're still waiting for some changes to one of the bills. So my anticipation would be that the agenda and the bills would be posted on this Friday, the 21st. Since I would be doing most of the presentation, I'd ask if somebody else would be willing to chair that meeting, just so somebody else can sort of handle any objections or concerns. Anybody like to volunteer to chair next meeting?
Janet?
Sure.
Okay, congratulations, Chair.
So thank you. Janet will be chairing the October 26th meeting. The next meeting, Janet.
Robert, that meeting is also going to address proposed rule changes, correct?
Yeah, so currently we have proposed conflicts of interest rule changes recommended. So there's going to be bills, 1 or 2 resolutions, and rule changes for the conflicts of interest. We also have drafted a public Bill of Rights,
Okay.
which we'd actually intend to be statutory.
That will cover a lot
Yes,
of issues that have come up. Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Okay, after that, we have a meeting blocked out for November 2nd. Does anybody have anything to present? Flo?
On November 1st, the Hawaii Prosecuting Attorneys Association, that would be the AGs and the 4 county prosecutors, will be meeting regarding a legislative package to include bills addressing public corruption. And so I'd like to present those bills and anything else on November 9, just so that there'll be sufficient time to post those bills for any public comments, because we'll get those on November 1st, but the meeting is scheduled for November 2nd, so that doesn't leave enough time.
But you will circulate them shortly after that, even though they wouldn't be formally presented till November 9?
Right.
Okay. That sounds fine to me.
Actually, Kristen, when were you intending to present the public finance bill?
We were looking at November 9th.
Do you think we potentially could do both?
I think so. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't have that.
I don't think Flo has that many bills, and how many do you think there are going to be, Flo?
3 to 5.
Okay. So Christian, you would have your public funding bill on the 9th. Flo would have her criminal bills on the 9th. Do we have anything for November 2nd? Okay, well, keep it blocked out if anybody has anything to present for November 2nd. But currently, we have it blocked out, but nothing scheduled.
Well, Judge, we
Barbara.
may be coming up with a study on super PACs, but the bill is still in draft and it's still up in the air.
Okay, so if Barbara's bill is finalized and can be circulated, maybe that would be for November 2nd.
Yeah, But if it's the only bill, we might, well,
Uh,
we might want to.
Super PACs are worth meeting on.
Yes, that's where
We,
the whole meeting.
we also have the public records bill, from our
Okay.
slate.
So we'll leave November 2nd blocked and maybe insert meeting. If we have some bills, it will take place. If not, it won't. So we have, hopefully, we will finish the consideration of all bills and rules on November 9, which would give us 3 weeks, which is not a lot, to begin finalizing the draft of the report with the bills and to begin circulating the report for consideration. And that's where we are. Any changes to that schedule can be taken up on October 26th, but that's our tentative schedule for now. And if there's nothing further, thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.